Hey guys, Adam here with AmericanMuscle.com, and today we're taking a closer look at, listening to, and I'm going to show you how to install the Roush Performance catback exhaust available for the 2018 and newer Mustang GT without active exhaust. Now, first and foremost, if you have an active exhaust equipped Mustang, you do have a lot of options in the category, but unfortunately this one will not be for you. However, if you don't have active exhaust, this is going to be for the guys out there who are looking for the loudest of the loud in the category. There's only a select few in the category that get the full 5 out of 5 on our loudness meter, and the Roush Performance is absolutely one of them. As you just heard from our sound clips, this thing is absolutely no joke. It's extremely loud, extremely aggressive, race inspired from head to toe, and it's just going to wake some neighbors in the morning, especially on cold start. One thing I will say, wide open throttle in this thing is absolutely mind-blowing. At idle, you do hear a little bit of a rumble, but it's not too overwhelming, which I really like when it comes to 5 out of 5 on the loudness meter. I'd say it does stay a little bit more mellow when it comes to the automatic transmissions. Well, as mellow as you can get with a 5 out of 5 on our loudness meter. Being that this is my buddy Justin's 2019 GT with the 10-speed automatic, I will say it doesn't hold the gear as long, so you're not revving all the way to the moon, but if you have a 6-speed manual, you can take advantage of the loudness and really rev this thing out to get the most out of it. I will say if you put it in sport mode and start using those paddle shifters a lot, you take full advantage of all that it has to offer as far as volume is concerned. The system here is made up of 304 stainless steel from head to toe, mandrel bends throughout, and an X pipe to help you get more power without restricting some of that airflow like your factory mid-pipe would with the resonator. No resonators included in this kit, and the mufflers here by the tips are pretty much a straight-through design and not a whole lot of baffling involved, which gets you the volume you hear there. You can also expect a nice horsepower and torque bump as well. Because you're unrestricted and it's reducing some of that back pressure, you can expect a good bump in power. With all of that in mind, this kit comes in right around $1,100, putting it a little more on the premium side of the spectrum. That's expected with a brand name like Roush. The install for this thing is going to get 2 out of 3 wrenches on our difficulty meter. Now, it's not the hardest thing in the world to do, but it is a little bit more involved than, say, a cold air intake. Anybody can tackle it in the driveway at home with simple hand tools, and I'd say about 2 hours from start to finish. I'll show you guys the entire process bolt by bolt, starting with the uninstall of our factory catback, so let's get to it. Tools used in this install include an impact gun or a ratchet, an extension, 13 and 15 millimeter deep sockets, flathead screwdriver, and a mallet. Now the first step of the uninstall here under our 2019 GT is to loosen up both of the band clamps holding your stock exhaust to the headers. Now what we're going to do is grab a 15 millimeter deep socket and loosen up the 2 bolts here and on the second one. Now we're not going to fully remove them, just get them loosened up so we'll be able to slide the rest of the exhaust out of place. Now the next step here is to go right under your cross member here, and we're going to remove the brackets holding our factory hangers to the frame. Now, these are 13 millimeter bolts. You have the option of sliding the hangers out of these brackets, but I find it to be way easier to just grab an extension and my 13 millimeter deep socket and get these bolts removed. Go right on over the rear sway bar. Pull those bolts out. You want to keep these because we're going to have to reuse those once we install our next exhaust. Now with those bolts removed, these brackets are actually hooked on to this cross member. So we're going to lift up and just unhook them and just rotate it down out of the way. Same thing on both sides. With the clamps by your factory manifolds or your headers loosened up, we've got the frame disconnected from those brackets on the hangers. At this point, we're gonna disconnect the stock exhaust from the headers, and I got my buddy Scott here to help me lower it down. If you're working on the ground on jack stands, it's gonna be a little bit easier for you to do by yourself, but since we're so high up in the air, you're gonna wanna have a buddy with you if you're working on a lift. So once we get these disconnected, we're just gonna slide the whole factory exhaust out of the hangers by the exhaust tips toward the front of the vehicle, then we'll be able to set it aside. Ready? On these clamps, there's a little bit of a tab holding this on, so you might need to grab a flathead and just peel up on that locking tab that holds it in position. So we finally got our factory exhaust off of our 2019 GT sitting on the ground here next to our Roush Performance Kit. Now I wanted to take you through a couple of the similarities and differences between the two, and I gotta say it is a pretty good night and day difference. Starting at the front of the exhaust here toward the front of the car, I wanna talk about that mid-pipe. Now the mid-pipe connecting to your stock manifolds does include that factory resonator. That's helping to keep some of that sound down. Now I will say the 19 GT, even the 2018 GT, they do sound really good from the factory. Switching, however, over to your X pipe from Roush is gonna open up that airflow, gonna reduce some of that airflow restriction, and it being a mandrel bent tubing, it's streamlining that from front to back. The X pipe does connect right in the middle, so it does reduce some of the restrictions that like an H pipe would produce. And this one here will produce a little bit more power, a little bit more sound, and honestly it will be a little bit more raspy than an H pipe, but I will say over that factory mid pipe with the factory resonator, this is gonna do a hell of a better job giving you better sound, better volume, and a little bit more power. Moving on from there, the rest of the tubing is a 304 stainless steel, 2.5-inch tubing. Moving backward, we don't have resonators, so we're not gonna be reusing the factory stuff there. Moving back toward the muffler, that's the next big change. Now you can see the hanger locations all stay the same, so it'll bolt up just like a factory exhaust, in pieces however. Those mufflers here are going to be revamped to give you the better sound. They are a bit more of a straight through muffler, not necessarily a straight pipe, but less baffling on the inside, keeping that sound down. You're gonna get a lot more volume as you heard from our sound clips earlier. These mufflers are race inspired, so they're there to give you as much out of the exhaust as possible. And at the end, it keeps that quad tip styling that we love from the new S550s, only this time it's a 4-inch polished stainless steel slash cut. Looks absolutely beautiful coming out the rear end. It's a lot more aggressive than the factory ones, a little bit more round instead of pointed edges. And on the side there, you have the Roush logo subtly printed into the materials. I'm a huge fan of that. Most aftermarket companies embed their name right at the top there, sticking out a little bit more like a sore thumb. Roush is a little more subtle on the side, and I think that gives you a nice little bit of appearance added to this design here. It is going to be a complete change, and I'm excited to show you guys how this gets installed. We're going to start at the back with the X pipe. Before we do that, however, we are going to transfer over our hanger brackets. Now, if you remember, I chose to remove those from the frame with those 13mm bolts. We're going to slide those brackets off of the factory hangers and slide them onto the new ones from Roush, and then we'll start up front at our X pipe. Starting with the uninstall, we're going to start with our X pipe, making sure that our factory band clamps are over the end here going into our factory manifolds. Now, when you put these in place, they will drop all the way down. You want to make sure they're about halfway up to leave enough room for the manifolds to slide in. So what we're going to do, just adjust that, and slide it up into place. Now, if you remember, those tabs that I removed or pulled up on with our flathead will go right back on to the locking button on the factory manifolds. Once they're in place, grab your 15mm socket and tighten these down. Now, I don't want to tighten these down too much. We just want to leave a little bit of room for adjustment in case we need to move it around. When we're done installing everything, we'll come back and torque it all down. All right, the next step is going to be the mid-pipe going under the independent rear, going toward where your mufflers will install before the tips. Now this is going to attach to the X pipe with a clamp on this end, and on the other end, make sure you're transferring over that hanger bracket. So you just pull that off the factory hanger and slip it right on over this one. And we're going to slide this into place on our passenger side. Just seat that all the way back into the pocket. I like to rotate this clamp upward so the bolt head is not hanging down too low, and then grab your 15mm socket and tighten it down. Again, I get it nice and snug, but still leave a little bit of room for adjustment in case we need to rotate. All right, now we can do the same thing for the driver's side pipe. Slide this into place, seat it all the way back, rotate that clamp upward, and tighten it down. At this point, we're gonna take those brackets on our hangers, rotate them upward, lift the exhaust, and clip the top of that into place. With that hung, do the same thing on the other side. Rotate upward, lift, just clip that into place. Take the 13mm bolts we took off in the beginning, just thread these on by hand. Perfect. Grab your 13mm socket and extension, tighten them down. All right, the next step, once we have those pipes in place and bolted down to that cross member, we're gonna grab our passenger side muffler, slide another clamp over this end here, insert the hanger into the hanger by our tips. Slide that all the way in. Line up the inlets and outlets. All right, from here, rotate that clamp upward, tighten it down. All right, now we're doing the same thing on the driver's side. Just make sure before you install this, you're inserting a clamp over the inlet and outlet. Now, if you're having trouble getting this on, you can always use a mallet on the outside and just try to tap it in. All right, once you have that seated all the way, rotate it upward a little bit, set your clamp into place and tighten it down. The next step is gonna be our tips. That's gonna be the final step before we go back and tighten everything down. With these tips, as you can see, one side is protruding out a little bit farther. Make sure that one is on the inside toward your deck lid panel, toward your reverse light, toward the inside of the vehicle. So that's gonna go, if we're on our passenger side, on our left. We're gonna install that, making sure we have a clamp on the end there. Slide that back, line it up in the cutout for your rear valance, grab a 15mm socket and tighten it down. All right, once you have that tightened down, go back and tighten down and make any adjustments that you need to get everything lined up properly. Torque down all of the clamps and you're good to go. Well guys, that's gonna wrap up my review, install, and sound clip of the Roush Performance Catback, available for the 2018 and newer Mustang GT without active exhaust. If you wanna get this catback, you can do so right here at AmericanMuscle.com.